So let me introduce you to the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Palm team. We have here Brian Bader. He is the palm entomologist, and he has done all the work with lethal bronzing disease. Fantastic work. He's been here for a few years, so you might have seen him give a presentation or two, or 100. Then we have Dr. Dillon, who started not too long ago, and he is the palm pathologist. And then, of course, you have me, and all three of us are here at the FLREC, and it's a very good relationship, because when I don't know something about the insects, I send it to Brian. Brian doesn't know something about the nutrients, and vice versa. So it works well. And just so you know, these are who you direct your questions to after the extension agent. Your extension agents will be contacting Brian or Brom or myself if they can't answer your questions. So since I've been on board in April, since I came on board, my top questions have been: one, lethal bronzing. That seems to pretty much dominate most of my technical questions, followed by, and again, with lethal bronzing, I do forward that to Brian for his final, basically sign off on that. And then diseases. Ganoderma seems to be a big one. And if you have the conch, I can help you with that one. If not, I do forward it to Brom for, as he is the palm pathologist. Third is fertility. I get a lot of questions on the fertility, and that is where I am featured. So we will be talking a little bit about the fertility on all these top questions. But again, for lethal bronzing and Ganoderma diseases, you're more likely going to go to Brian or to Brom. And fourth, last but not least, is the cultural practices. A lot of questions on pruning, a lot of questions on transplanting, how deep to plant palms. So those I've all put under the cultural practices, but we won't be discussing that today. Our focus is going to be on the fertility. So, nutrient deficiencies in palms. By far, and I mean by leaps and bounds, potassium deficiency is going to be the #1 nutrient deficiency I see in palms. And once you start looking for these, if you're driving along, down the interstate, you're going to start seeing it everywhere. Sometimes, for me, lately, potassium deficiency is getting confused with LBD, but there are some distinct differences that we're going to go over. With potassium deficiency, you're going to see the yellow and orange spots on the oldest leaves. And keep in mind, potassium is denoted as K, so it's always going to be on those oldest leaves. They're going to be speckled. And when you hold that leaf up, if you can look under it and through it and it's translucent, it's more than likely a potassium deficiency. Also with potassium, you're going to see where the ends are curled or basically dead looking. Very curly tips, again, an indication of potassium deficiency. Now, in the Phoenix species, this summer, I saw quite a bit of this, where they have the brittle tips, almost like you could snap off the palm frond. We see that quite a bit in, like I said, the Phoenix species. It's just a strange look, hard to detail, but it's very brittle. So you could go up and snap it off, then definitely it's a severe potassium deficiency. Now, why do we get the potassium deficiency in Florida soils, particularly down here in the South? It could be because we have a high-end fertilizer. A lot of these palm trees are located underneath turf grass. So when that is the case, normally you'll see the turfgrass manager using a high-end fertilizer. Well, that can lead to your potassium deficiency. So I'm going to show you a picture here. Here's a palm frond, and you can see the speckled yellow necrotic spots, very kind of round and circular. And of course, here you have where you can see the the curly tips on the end, almost dead and dying, but they're curling up. And again, it's transitioning from like an orange all the way to a green. And you have where it's turning yellow, good indication of potassium deficiency. And right through here, like I said, with potassium, if you can take a picture of your palm tree and stand back from your palm tree, and you see where the oldest leaves are basically looking like this. Again, the curling tips, the off color, almost like an orange to like a bright red or bright orange transition, the speckling on the oldest leaves, then it is probably a potassium deficiency. Here on this palm, you can see where the oldest leaves again are suffering from those curly brown tips, whereas the younger leaves, you're not seeing too much of that deficiency yet. Again, with potassium, one of the problems might also be the high calcium as well in the soil. It might be binding up that potassium. And we'll get into it a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit about soil pH and why that happens. But for right now, let's see. Now, the second nutrient deficiency that I do receive a lot of photos on is manganese. This is what we call the frizzle top, basically the frizzle top deficiency. It's a reduced size, the chlorosis of the newer leaves, or the turning yellow of the newer leaves. So with potassium, it's on the older, and with manganese, it's on the younger leaves. And it's almost got like a frizzy hair or frizzy dead leaves at the top of the palm. It is most severe at the base leaves. So this is a very good indicator for you when you're looking up at your palm fronds, and you obviously sometimes you can't reach them, but if you look up and you can see that the base of the leaf is more severe, then that's another good indicator of manganese deficiency. Also, if you can get the leaf, if it falls off, or if you're looking down on the leaf, it's a younger palm, then you can see this longitudinal streaking on the palm leaves. Now that means that it's longer. When we say longitudinal streaking, it's much longer. It's not the speckle that you would get with the potassium deficiency. And also with potassium, again, you're going to see it towards the end of the leaf or end of the frond, whereas with manganese, you're going to see it towards the base of the leaf. Why do we have manganese deficiency in palms? It's because we do typically have a high soil pH down here in the south, not everywhere in Florida, and that high soil pH prevents manganese from being available in the soil solution. Again, another picture of what we call the frizzle top. It's almost like frizzy hair, except that it's dead towards the base of the leaf. Here you see the frond is actually pretty normal looking. It's green, but towards the base, it is definitely on its way out. So if the frond could fall to the ground, or if you could see it from that side, you would see that longitudinal streaking on the palm leaves. Again, caused by high soil pH, and we'll go over that in a little bit. Now, magnesium is very different from manganese. With magnesium deficiencies, you're going to have the light color on the outer margin, and it almost makes it a little easier to tell than manganese because it's almost a yellow lemony color. If you look at this photo here, the state palm, you can definitely see the yellowing right through here, but through the middle of the frond, it's very green. And when you have a magnesium deficiency, that the middle of the frond remains green. Also with magnesium, it's going to be the low or mid canopy. It's not going to be up at the top where manganese normally is. It's going to be at the lower and mid canopy. And sometimes with magnesium, you're going to have the potassium fertilization may overlay, the potassium deficiency may overlie the magnesium deficiency, meaning this right through here, the tip ends curling, is definitely a potassium deficiency. This frond right through here, definitely the magnesium deficiency. So why do we see magnesium deficiency in your soils? It could be soil pH, or it could be the potassium is too high in the soil, preventing the plant from taking up the magnesium. Show you another beautiful picture by Dr. Brochat, where you can see the lower to mid canopy of the date palm is affected by the magnesium deficiency, bright yellow, but through the middle of the frond, it's a deep green. So a great indicator of magnesium deficiency. And the one thing I would suggest is when you're going to send some pictures to extension agents or to me, when you take that picture, if you could stand back from the palm tree, I get a lot of pictures where you know, the photo is right up on the palm. If you could stand back and take these pictures, and you could almost tell from yourself that this could easily be magnesium. You could diagnose it yourself. But if you stand back, that helps me to say, okay, that's definitely the lower to mid canopy. And you know, if you can get a little piece of the frond, that would be great. But I know a lot of these palms are so tall you can't reach them. But one from underneath the canopy, yes, they help, but we do like the overall palm so we can see where it's growing, and kind of the environment and what is being exposed to as well. So just a nice little tip. So boron, actually had a few calls last week on boron deficiency, a big one for me, but an easy one. Why? Because boron deficiencies are always on the new leaves. So only the new leaf up near the spear leaf is affected by a boron deficiency. And why do I say it's easy for me is because I can tell now that it's like the accordion leaf. There, you can just tell that this palm is funky looking with the accordion leaves, like it's bent up, just like an accordion would be. And they call it the hook leaf. I believe is the term that Tim used on some of the boron papers that he wrote. You can see here that accordion leaf right where my mouse is, accordion leaf right through here. This inflorescence has very clearly necrotic, and just the palm in itself, actually the palm is starting to bend over. So when you know it's a boron deficiency, because you will have numerous or just an unopened spear leaf, but the crown will bend in one direction and the new leaves will grow downward. So why do we get boron deficiencies here? In Florida, it's either one, because of high rainfall. So during the rainy season, the rain will fall down, flush out the boron, but boron will eventually, it's bound to the soil organic matter, so eventually will be replaced. Also, if you're in areas where it's very dry, like the desert, somewhere out west, if you have or see a boron deficiency, it might be because of the high soil pH. And when soils are dry, the boron attaches to these dry soil particles, and it's very difficult to release it to the plant. But of course, during our rainy season, you might start seeing something towards the end in the spear leaf. Toward the end of the rainy season, you might start seeing some of these boron deficiencies. And again, this is a beautiful photo by Dr. Brochat. You can clearly see the unopened spear leaves, almost the accordion type of frond right through here. And the palm is almost sort of bending to the right. So again, a good one, pretty prevalent here in Florida. And one that I will say in the last few weeks, I've gotten quite a few questions on this one. So what are our fertilizer recommendations? So if you have something like this happen, if you look at your palm and you say, yep, that's definitely a potassium deficiency, manganese, magnesium, we do recommend fertilizing with, for the magnesium and the potassium, we do recommend fertilizing with the Palm Special. It is a controlled release fertilizer. Again, no, we're not really putting out a ton of nitrogen here, because we don't want to tie up the potassium, a little bit of phosphorus, and then you have quite a high potassium and then a little bit of magnesium here. Put it out 3 times a year at a rate of 1.5 pounds per 100 square feet. And you should see some results with the potassium. If you're trying to correct a potassium deficiency, you might not see that result for months or even a year, maybe even 2 years. That's why we don't, when you have a potassium deficiency, we don't recommend removing those fronds, because the plant can still utilize the potassium that's in those fronds that are dead or close to dying, still taking up some of that, those nutrients from those fronds. So again, we do recommend this fertilizer called Palm Special. And over the summer, I was getting quite a few phone calls on, number one, it was very expensive, which it's so noted, but also the supply chain, there was not a lot of that out there. So I believe they rectified some of that, because I did see it in the stores. But that was something when the supply chain was tied up, we just couldn't get access to the Palm Special. There is also during the time of the year when you cannot fertilize, from May, June, July, and August during our rainy seasons, you do have an option of just going out with the potassium and magnesium to take care of some of those deficiencies. We're not putting out the phosphorus, we're not putting out the nitrogen, but the potassium and the magnesium. So I am a soil scientist, and I will tell you that I always recommend taking a look at your soil, and this picture here closely resembles what my home lawn or my home soil looks like. I'm actually on a canal here in Fort Lauderdale, and you can basically see when you stick the shovel in, you pull out the dirt, it's basically concrete in my soil. Both it's horrible to take that shovel and hit the soil, and it just is hard as a rock. I about broke my teeth last weekend doing that. So what we have is these big pieces of concrete, and people say, well, what is that from? And it's where they dumped all the fill. And my home was built back in the 60s. So a lot of that, most of my yard is on this fill, lots of big pieces of concrete from the pilings and things. So we don't have the best soil, and that's not the case everywhere in Florida. I'm talking about here in South Florida, definitely some locations in mid Florida, but sometimes we have beautiful soil, some of the marl soils. But again, this is where everything starts. This is how we know what our nutrients are in the soil profile. So we really want to pay attention to what is going on in our soil profile. Now, knowing I have that type of soil, I'm going to try to amend it. I will work with many different things on my home lawn, and I'll also be doing this here at the research station to basically amend around a certain shrub, particularly when I'm growing basically on concrete. But the number one thing I ask for people to do is to test for soil pH. Why do I do that? Because if we're going to be looking at nutrient deficiencies in palms, we need to know that what is available in our soils, because that is where the plant is most of the time going to be accessing its nutrients. Here we have, we're at 7 on the pH scale, 6.5 to 7.5, and you'll see that your major nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are all available within that 7 range. But when we start looking at manganese, as we talked a little bit about manganese deficiencies in palms, you can see manganese is actually a little more available at the lower soil pHs than it is at the higher soil pH. Now, I have tested the soil pH at my house, and it is over 8. I have tested pHs throughout the state of Florida. Up in Orlando, as high as 8.7 and 9. So your pHs are getting all the way up here, and you're seeing where you're going to start having a lot of nutrient deficiencies, particularly with things like iron, manganese, and boron. So again, if you are going, my recommendation is just doing one test every so often, like every other year, and testing your soil pH. And it also lets you know what is your cation exchange capacity, so it can let you know whether your soil is dominated by potassium or if it's dominated by calcium. That is something that you should definitely take a look at. And where would you send it? You could send it to the UF IFAS Extension for Soil Testing Lab. Some of your extension offices offer soil testing, but there is a wonderful way to test for soils at your home landscape that is here on an EDIS publication that you can take a look at. But again, not too much on that, but it is one of the reasons why we have such a deficient nutrients here in Florida when you have the high pHs. Even, I will say, in some of the Florida pinelands, you'll get lower or more acidic soils. And again, you're looking at a lot of nutrient deficiencies. So it doesn't matter where you are, I think you should test for your soil pH. So we're going to go over a little bit about Florida native palms. And you can see here, we've got 11 native palms. I think there's one more on here, but I believe they think that might be extinct. Anyway, here are some of your, most of your native palms. You can see the reason why I'm bringing this up is, oh, sorry about that. Okay, for instance, the silver palm, Coccothrinax argentata. Beautiful pictures here by Ed Gillum and John Park. Again, a native palm. I don't get too many questions on this one here in terms of nutrient deficiency. Again, if it's native, it's more likely going to be able to withstand things like hurricanes, our rainy season, our dry season. If you stick to the native palms, you're not going to have as many issues. Still need to be managed, but you're not going to have as many issues. The Paurotis palm, we have a lot of these here around the research center. Everglades palm, again, I don't really see, I see deficiencies in them, but I'm not getting as many phone calls on things that are more native. Beetle palm, a beautiful palm. Again, don't get too many phone calls on this one. And of course, our native palmettos, like the scrub palmetto and the dwarf palmetto here, the scrub palmetto liking or preferring the sandier soils rather than the dwarf palmetto, which prefers more of like a wetland or a moisture environment than its counterpart. And of course, the thatch palms, the Thrinax morrissii and Thrinax radiata, or the Key Thatch Palm and the Florida Thatch Palm. Again, native species, even some way down in the Keys, but they do well here in our soils and in our environment, able to withstand the hurricanes, able to withstand some of our high soil pHs and you know, some of our poor water quality. And even to some extent, some of the saltwater intrusion as well. Here's your royal palm. Again, a beautiful tree. I see a lot of deficiencies with this tree. A lot of phone calls on this one, and this one's a tough one to get to because it's so big. But again, a native palm, it does well in our soils. It can have some nutrient deficiencies and issues with nutrient uptake, but again, able to withstand hurricanes. And we can't forget about the Florida state tree, the sable palmetto. Again, all over the state of Florida, does really well in the state, hence the Florida state tree. Okay, so I talked a little bit about, you know, you can find that on our EDIS publications about native palms or palms that you could put in our environment. They do well here. But we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the UF IFAS assessment of non-native plants. And I was actually introduced to this app. It's the Florida Friendly Landscape Plant Guide app. I have it on my phone. And if you put in for any of, I think it comes up with 37 palms that they would recommend for planting throughout the state of Florida. I didn't put in for a certain zip code, but you can do that and they'll make recommendations. But the whole goal is to prevent non-native plant invasions to protect Florida's natural and agricultural areas. So very worthwhile. I do like the Plant Guide app. It's free. But if you're looking at putting in new shrubs, new flowers, and new palms, then that would be a good recommendation to take a look at that Plant Guide app. So you stick within what we consider the non-native plants, or there are non-native plants on that app, but stick within plants that do well here in the state of Florida so they don't become invasive. Or so we don't have any issues with invasive species. I was a little shocked to find that, you know, some of the Eureka palms, Chinese fan palms, which I see all over, the Washington fan palm, solitary palm everywhere down here, queen palm everywhere. These are all caution down here in the south. Not so much up north, of course, because some of that frost and some of your colder climates, these aren't going to be able to withstand those colder climates, nor even towards the central area. But if you take a look at the Chinese fan palm throughout the whole state of Florida, this is considered a caution on the invasive species. So here we even have where the Senegal date palm or Phoenix reclinata is invasive and should not be planted down here in the south of Florida, but not a problem in central or north Florida. So it just gives you an idea. And if you go on to the website, the IFAS assessment of non-native plants, they outline all of these. If you have a question about a plant, a palm, they can give you some guidance on whether it can or shouldn't be planted. So I was brokenhearted to learn, of course, that the coconut palm is considered down here in South Florida as an invasive. You're a little luckier in Central Florida because it's only in a caution, but up north it's not a problem, probably because it won't be able to stand those temperatures. But even down here, they do give some recommendations on a coconut palm, such as, because I even have one in my yard, I have to say. Planted before I got there, but it is one of those where you don't want to plant it near a waterway. You want to prevent the fruit from entering the waterways and the canals, and then of course you want to place the fruit in the yard waste. So even though it is invasive, it is giving you recommendations for this particular coconut palm to be planted if you can make sure that you're getting rid of the fruit, so it doesn't spread and become an issue. Let's see. Yeah, and know that and around the canals where I am, it is definitely, you see the coconuts floating everywhere in the waterways. So it is still on the invasive palm species. I think for another, I don't want to say, but it is on there. But I think they'll reevaluate in the next couple of years. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what my future focus is going to be here at the Research Center. We're going to talk a little bit about mule palms because there has been a lot of questions asked about how far north mule palms can go. And just for those of you who don't know, mule palms are a cross between the pinto palm and the queen palm. And they are considered very cold hardy. So they do well up more towards Orlando. They do well here too, but a lot of people like them because they're like, it's very similar to a coconut look. Again, but much cold hardier than your typical coconut palm. Although I have heard some comments about the mule palms, and they might have, I have seen a couple of nutrient deficiencies, but those can be rectified. But again, this is something that we want to explore maybe a little bit further north in the Panhandle to see how far we can take these mule palms up, and to see how well they'll do a little bit further north in Gainesville or up towards Tallahassee. And one of my favorite palms, I think it's just a gorgeous palm, the Bismarckia nobilis. This is cold hardy to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but I have heard that it may be a little more cold hardy than we think. So we will be evaluating this particular palm, as it is just a gorgeous palm. And we do see them everywhere down here. I personally have not seen too many nutrient deficiencies on them, but again, they do get, they can become nutrient deficient, and they will exhibit that as well. But we will be evaluating the Bismarck palm a little bit further north to see just how cold hardy we can extend it. And as we're going through, why are we doing this? As we're going through this global climate change, we're starting to see a lot more warmer temperatures. I'm moving more of the palms further north to see what we can grow a little bit within the range. The palms that are still able to withstand hurricanes and are, persnickety soil. So that is something that we definitely will be exploring, because it is, when I did come here in April, we were inundated with questions on cold hardiness of certain palms. So I think it would be a good thing to address. Next is fertilizer, granular versus injection. I've had a lot of questions on injecting fertilizers. I have never done it myself, but right now I am putting together a research trial where we're going to be looking at mini palms, mini fertilizers, to see what happens when we do decide to inject. I understand the benefit of it, particularly if you're on a waterway, particularly if it's a palm where there's no soil to capture or uptake any of the nutrients. I have seen palms basically planted in right next to a swimming pool and absolutely growing in no soil. Where do you put that fertilizer to fertilize that palm? So I get the environmental impact. I also understand that we don't ever, generally make the recommendation of putting a hole in a palm, just to prevent the pathogens, such as LBD or, some of the insects from getting into the palm. But now there are ways where we can take a silicone plug and plug that up. And if you're careful with basically cleaning your drill and your injection system, then you should be okay. But we are going to be evaluating that. We'll take a look at the environmental impact of it, the cost. And a lot of questions are, why do we always say, we inject at the bottom? Well, generally because palms are so tall, but we inject at the bottom. But what would the difference be if we inject it near the crown? Would the uptake be better? We don't know. Those are a couple of questions that we would like to visit. And we also want to know what's the time to visual results and the duration of these injections. And what do we do to the vascular system of the palm? Again, something that we don't have a lot of knowledge of, and a lot of questions received on it since I've been on board. And I know talking to previous professors here, that is something that they have been asked as well. So also, can we use a preventative versus a treatment effect? Maybe we inject during the no fertilizer regulatory laws, and then we spread granular or preventative granular fertilizers during the other time of the year. Again, something that we are going to be evaluating. Transplant stress. This is something that I would like to look at as is dealing with the soil, and how can we offset some of, you're putting in a new palm and we have soil that looks basically like concrete, or you're having a soil that's very acidic. Can we help to establish a plan with uptake and better nutrients? Talking to Dr. Moore, she has done some research where she and Dr. Brochat looked at palms that they were transplanting, and she found that it didn't, the amendments weren't so important whereas it was the fertilizer. The fertilizer was very key to helping withstand the transplant stress. What I would like to look at is, some of these alternative substrates like biochar, compost, surfactants, and biostimulants, and mycorrhizing. We know that mycorrhizing can actually help stimulate and improve, help stimulate the roots to take up nutrients. So that would be definitely something worth evaluating here in our sandy soils. Again, we want to look at the cost of these applications. Are they doable for the homeowner versus FDOT? And again, something to think about. We also want to look at altering soil moisture, because our recommendation for planting palms is to plant during the rainy season. But we all know that not everybody is going to plant a palm during the rainy season. So can we amend the soil so you're not watering as much? And can we amend the soil so that the plant is, or the palm is not as affected by poor water quality, like high saline water? So that is something that we will definitely be evaluating. Let's see how I'm in time. Okay, I've got a couple more minutes. So we're looking at salinity studies as well, part of my research program, and one of the reasons why UF hired me was so we could look at saltwater intrusion. And here where we are, we do see down here in Broward County where saltwater intrusion is definitely becoming an issue. And for my, from my background, I'm looking at all the palms that have been studied, looking at salinity stress and things like that. And it tends to be the date palms, or it tends to be the African oil palm. So we want to take a look at, you know, other palms, the foxtails, and some of these native species where they weren't so they weren't exposed to such high saline water, but now that the salt water is coming in, what are they going to do? What are these native species going to do with high sodium water? And of course, we're going to be irrigating with it and submerging the plants in it, just like their roots were down in the ground, and taking visual and root evaluations. So that is something that maybe by the next time we have the meeting, we'll have some data on and can share that data with you. And we will be looking at a plethora of species, and not just, you know, our native palms, but also maybe some unique species as well. So something that I'm very excited about, particularly for Master Gardeners, is the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center Palm Walk and Demonstration Garden. So here at Fort Lauderdale, we are actually, I think, the only research center that is right next to the Extension building. So when we give a Master Gardener talk, when I've given my Master Gardener talks, we literally just walk right across the street. So what would be nice for us down here, this is a picture of the research area behind the research station. And you can see here, here is I think this is college for the Nova. And we're going to start putting in unique species of palms. And we're working with Montgomery Botanical Garden. They are very big into the conservation of palms, and they have been giving us some of these very rare palms, and maybe some palms that would be able to withstand our hurricane season and this unique climate here in Fort Lauderdale. And if we can grow these palms here, we would like to see if we can grow them further north. Again, like we said, they're rare palms, unique. But we are also working with some of our growers, and they're sharing some of their palms with us. So I want to be able to, you know, open up and explore some palms that we might be able to put in our own landscapes. So that's pretty exciting. We also want you to see real time what I see when I evaluate for things like transplant stress. You know, is biochar working better than a compost amendment? And does it work better for a date palm versus an African oil palm? We want to know planting depth. So I can show you in real time what happens when you plant a palm too deep, and what happens when you plant a sable palmetto too deep. Again, we're going to be doing pruning studies. I am hoping that my Corphinides will help me with these pruning studies against the salinity studies real time. So we plan on, this palm walk is being designed by Gail Hansen and her team up at Gainesville. So it sounds like it's just going to be beautiful, but it's a demonstration garden, so people like the master gardeners and schools can come in and see what's so unique about palms and why the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center is the #1 place worldwide for palm research. Again, water stress studies, rooting studies, and other landscape studies will definitely be taking place here. So we're really hoping to make it enjoyable for master gardeners, and you can stop by. It will be open to the public, but we plan on incorporating that into some of the master gardener programs. And last but not least, I think I'm on time here. We are going to be hosting palm short courses. So our first one is actually next Tuesday. I think there's about 10 more tickets available, and it is going to be here at the research station. It is a full day. We are having Dr. Griffith from Montgomery Botanical Garden come and talk to us about palm conservation. Mike Orphanides is going to be doing a palm pruning talk. Brian will be talking not only about lethal decline phytoplasmas, but their vectors in the Caribbean and southeastern United States. Bram will be talking about diseases. Kim will be talking about nutrient deficiencies. And I'll be giving an overview of the alternative fertilizers, amendments, and irrigation sources, and what we'll be studying here at the Research Center. We do plan on taking this palm short course throughout the state. So if you are located up in the Panhandle or in Gainesville or on the West Coast in Tampa, we will be coming to an area nearer to you. In February, I believe it's going to be up towards the Orlando, Tampa, Apopka area. So we're still working out the details on all of them, but it will be within the next few months, probably in the next 6 months. We're trying to get in 4 or 5 more locations. I know we're going to do one near Tallahassee, and we're also going to do one, I think, towards Jacksonville. So, and we may change it up a little bit, but we are trying to open up, some different speakers. You would like Dr. Kern to come and speak about bees and, what is the impact of spraying imidacloprid for palm insect issue. What would that be the impact on with bees, things like that. So we're opening it up to other professors here at the research station, as well as throughout the state. So there will be different names, but basically the same speakers. So you can meet Dr. Bader, Dr. Dillon, and myself, Dr. Moore. And the other thing that I think I'm very interested in doing, and we've had a really good response, is we're opening up some discussion about other gardens. So I would like to speak about some of we have wonderful, wonderful gardens throughout the state. And we were highlighting the Montgomery Botanical Garden because their work is so incredibly important in palm conservation, but we plan on highlighting other gardens throughout the state. I've had people submit, gardens that they would highly recommend, but we would like to start introducing a wider audience to some of these gardens and what makes each of these gardens unique. So we were at Flamingo Gardens a couple weeks ago, and I found out Flamingo Gardens has some of the oldest palms here in Broward County. So that's something definitely worth exploring, and I'm very excited to have that. So again, you don't have to register for the Palm Short course now. We have no, right now we're not planning on doing a virtual course. So unfortunately, all these will be in person. If we're going to do a virtual course, we may do it later in the fall of next year. So there's that, and that ends my presentation. So thank you all very much for listening.
Great, thank you, Dr. McMillan. All right, so I'm actually going to turn everybody's mics and cameras on. You do not have to have them on if you don't want to. So if you would like to ask a question, you can, but I do have questions in the chat for you. So I'm not sure Lisa was ever able to make her sound work, but I have got questions in the chat for you. So I'm going to start from the top here. And so we've got a recent transplant from out west, and she's confused about what may be happening to her pindo palm. The fronds are shooting straight up, they're not arching, and they're trapping the fruit inside the frond bunch. The fronds seem to be quite healthy, green, and not burned, and she was hoping to make some jelly and other items with the fruit. Any idea what might be going on?
Well, my recommendation would be you said she was from where, Emily?
Well, she's from Las Vegas, but now she's in Suwannee County. Okay.
My recommendation would be to send some pictures to the extension agent. They can perhaps guide you on some of that. It does sound like maybe a little bit of when the fronds aren't completely opening up. Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. When the fronds are not opening up.
Right.
Emily?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So when the fronds, particularly up near the spear leaf, aren't opening to their full, it is typically a nutrient deficiency. So is there any coloring with that? Is there something that might give us more insight into, is it yellow? Could it be manganese? Boron deficiency, though, also can cause the fronds not to open up all the way. With some of the fertilizer deficiencies or the nutrient deficiencies, you can tell that a lot of them have that issue with not being able to open up the fronds all the way. So definitely worth taking a picture and sending it to the extension agent, and they can't answer that question, and will forward it to me, and we can help you out from there.
Okay, good. All right, so the next question, when a boron deficiency occurs, such as in the photos you showed, is there a chance for that tree to recover from that severe of a symptom?
Good question. Good question. So I have seen trees that weren't as bad as that particular photo recover from boron deficiencies. Again, the boron, particularly after the rainy season, particularly after a rainfall event, will eventually be available again to the plant. But I have seen some recover, particularly in my neighborhood. They've come back. It takes them a while. But if you're starting to see like the necrosis of the inflorescence, I would definitely recommend treating. There are chronic boron deficiencies. So if you're seeing this, and if you were seeing it before it got this severe, it could be a chronic deficiency. And then I would recommend treating with a boron fertilizer like Granular. But yes, I have seen them come back with, it's pretty severe, but they've come back.
Okay, next question. How do you prune a needle palm?
Oh, good question, and one that should be directed to Mike Orphanides. As I said, I just started in April, and this is something that I am really relying on Mike Orphanides for. He is actually going to be coming with us on all of these palm short courses, but if that's a question, I can certainly direct you towards him, and he would be able to answer your question better than I would at this time.
Okay. Is there any move to protect sable palms, given their very slow growth rates and the way they are grabbed for roadsides and big construction?
Ooh, I learned about this when I first started, and I learned about the 70s grab for the sable palmettos, but I see them all over. So I think they're doing pretty well. I mean, we do, for us, we're not growing any here. There's a couple of older sable palms here at the research center, but as far as I know, I think they're doing so well out and about, and we've got so many of them. There's really not a conservation effort on that part. There are, from my standpoint, there's enough of them out there. I don't see the conservation movement for that right now.
Okay, so why do you remove the fruit from the water? So this person sees it all around Selby Gardens.
Yeah, so absolutely. So with the Cocoa nucifera, the coconut palm, the fruit falls into the water, right? And the water then will transport it to places where we don't want to. It's being considered an invasive species. So it would go with any plant that you don't want spread throughout South Florida or throughout Florida. There is a lot of debate on this, whether, I mean, it's the coconut palm. It is basically the palm of all palms here in Florida in regards to the symbolism of it. Whether you believe it to be an invasive species or not, I'm stuck in here between, I understand the reason for the invasive species. It's not a native species. However, it's all over the place. And so, yes, you want to remove them from the waterway so they don't spread and move further inland and transport what is considered right now to be an invasive species. That's why you would remove them from the waterways.
All right. For mule palms, are the seeds fertile or sterile like a mule is sterile?
Sterile. That's the reason why it's called a mule palm.
And then another question about mule palms, if they do produce fruit, which if they're sterile, they're not producing fruit then, right?
They might still produce, my understanding here is they are sterile. I don't know about the fruit of it though. So okay. I don't know that.
Do you know if the fruit is edible like a pinto palm?
I do not know, but it's a good question. I don't
know. Can you share the latest recommendations on dealing with LBD? And do you still advise to remove the palms?
If the palm is affected by LBD and you have that confirmed, and basically, Brian has confirmed it through his lab, that yes, absolutely remove the palm because, it is transmitted by the leafhopper, and basically it will eventually end up dying. Now, having said that, the latest LBD recommendations are given by Dr. Brian Bader. They are an EDIS publication, and Brian and your extension agents are all up on the latest LBD recommendations. Yes, so removal of the palm is still our current recommendation.
Okay. And this person wonders if it's a good idea to plant rear palms on campus, knowing that LBD is present on the grounds. Kind of a comment and question in one.
Wow. Would you plant rare palms on campus knowing that LBD is on the campus, correct?
Yes. So like at the extension office, let's say, or.
Right. So we're working very diligently to, Brian is doing some of his work over in areas that we know where Brian is. And from our standpoint, we're planting them in areas where we know that that's not going to be an issue. We've got them started in the greenhouses. And again, if we don't know from our standpoint if these rare palms are susceptible to LBDZs or not. So in that extent, we're trying to help that we're basically learning something from here. We have these rare palms. Were they affected by the LBD? We don't have the answer to that. So, and listen, with rare palms, we're not the only ones receiving rare palms. They are being disseminated throughout the world so we can conserve them. But again, we are a learning station, so that we would learn something from the susceptibility of the palms to the LBD.
Okay, and then last question. Boron can be highly toxic, so care should be taken to address boron deficiency. Shouldn't you apply a specially balanced palm fertilizer instead?
You're absolutely right. Boron can be deficient. If you are seeing a chronic boron deficiency, again, you're treating for a boron deficiency, which your palm special fertilizer would not typically have enough of that in there. So if you need to add more boron, then mix more of it. I believe it's called Granular, in with your slow release fertilizer, and that will also help with this chronic boron fertilizer deficiency.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. McMillan. And so we're very happy to have you with us today and give us all this new knowledge about palms. So everyone, if you will make sure that you click the red leave button, and it looks like a phone hanging up. It's red, and then you'll go back to your agenda, and for the next hour, we're going to be on a lunch break, and the IFAS bookstore will be with us. But make sure that you click the red leave button so that you are out of this meeting, because it'll actually put you into, and you might get to hear double echoes of people talking in the background. So we will see you in just a minute in the lunch break with the IFAS bookstore.
Thank you, Emily.